What's up, guys? This is God, Grit, and Glory, and I am your host, Vito Creed. We talk about the stuff that most people stay quiet about: Jesus, business, politics, and occasionally a few conspiracy theories. No scripts, no filters, just straight up truth. So join us as we unravel and speak truth. Hi, this is Vito with God, Grit, and Glory. We're here to discuss some conspiracies. This is part two. We talked about Charlie Kirk's death last time, and we kind of expanded on it. The podcast stemmed out to be a little bit longer than expected, so we wanted to break it down into a two-part series. And so this is the second part of the series. So a two-part series to kind of discuss some of the issues, some of the conspiracies, some of the some of the quote unquote baseless claims and the hoaxes and stuff like that. So you have a lot of stuff kind of going on that I feel like people wanted to know about, and I think they're very important to discuss. And so there's one thing I wanted to mention. In fact, was Rob McCoy, and it's like Rob McCoy is this individual, and he's really pissed off that all these conspiracies are coming out and this and that. And the one just actually came out about Rob McCoy and his son Matt, where he actually claims that he had called his father instantly, and there was a video that came out of him just running around frantically on the scene. Well, what happened was he gets, I say shot with air quotes there. And then all of a sudden, Matt starts, he kind of walks off the scene. He doesn't walk up to it. He sort of quietly walks off, and you could see him get on his phone, and he starts calling. And there's evidence that that Erica Kirk was the one he called. And so what was said, who knows? But, then Rob comes out during his speech and says, hey, my son, he called me immediately, and he told me that I had blood all over me and this and that. You didn't have any blood on you. What are you talking about? There was no blood on you. All the blood that was on you, there was no blood. In fact, we talked about this. There's no blood anywhere. There's no blood on the concrete, on the pavements, and they'll claim, oh, well, the pavement was already changed. You can't, there's no blood anywhere. So that's suspicious. Then you have the big one where Candace Owens actually comes out and says, hey, I have this exchange with me and Charlie Kirk. We're good friends and stuff like that. And that one was completely absurd. Candace Owens did a couple of other things that were kind of irritating to me. She had made a claim that Charlie Kirk was in fact a Catholic, and he was doing mass right before he passed away, and da-da-da-da. And I thought that was insane, because it's like, are you kidding me? There is probably a couple dozen videos surfing around the internet where, there's clips or entire like dialogues with Charlie specifically talking about how he doesn't support, specifically, he doesn't support Catholicism because of the Mariology. He doesn't support Catholicism because they worship Mary when they're supposed to be worshiping Christ. So they're not Christ-centric. And he was very big on vocalizing that and saying, hey, no, if you're going to be worshiping anybody, it's going to have to be Christ. Otherwise, we're not for it. So that's a big one, so it kind of ties into the fact that Candace Owens says, well, she's sort of like, I don't even know why. I don't know why she, the only thing that comes to mind, and when I hear stuff like that, is anybody trying to attack somebody on their Christianity. I mean, it's a little dicey to say, but it's like, it's sort of like the spirit of Jezebel, right? You got the spirit of Jezebel that makes these claims that, oh man, instantly, oh yeah, he's a Catholic. So let me tell you something about Catholicism. Catholicism is not biblical, and so it really is not. It's literally idolatry. They worship Mother Mary. They do the rosary, and then they do all of their, there's a bunch of stuff, that the little rituals that they do, and they say, oh no, it's part of it. It's part of this, and Hail Marys and everything that they do. And they say, well, Mary will vouch for you and stuff like that in front of Christ. That's not biblical. None of that is biblical. And all of it, in my opinion, is quite literally heresy. And I say that with an open heart, and, the Holy Spirit does not convict me, because I understand the fact that there is definitely something that is heretical about that. In fact, John MacArthur's teaching on that was very, 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 very specific, and he's like, hey, Catholicism is nothing short of heresy. That's it. I mean, he didn't beat around the bush. He quite literally said you're going down the pathway potentially to hell when you're worshiping somebody like Mother Mary other than Christ. We are not called to worship angels or even people. I mean, for those people that love to worship Trump or any other ideology or patriotism or anything other than Christ. I mean, Christ should always be first. I mean, we can be Christ-centric and then support people. We can support Trump or, Charlie, like I supported Charlie Kirk and so forth. But we have to be careful not to make these people our idols, where our entire existence revolves around these individuals and they become our identity. And so that's very dangerous. So that being said, that was a big issue that I found. And so when Candace Owens was sort of going down the rabbit hole here with some of her claims, I mean, she was coming out and saying all sorts of stuff like, oh, this is Illuminati, this is that. She was sort of throwing whatever she can at the wall. It's sort of like that concept. Let's just throw as much, crap at the wall and hopefully some of it sticks. So that way, a few years or months or whatever rolls by and she could say, oh yeah, see, I told you so. I was right all along. And so, it's kind of absurd. It's kind of like where there's a lot of people that are prophets and, and there's like 100 prophecies and one is accurate. And they're like, see, he's a prophet because he had one wrong. Look, there's a famous saying, even a clock is correct 2 times a day, right? So when somebody makes it a bunch of claims and none of them are true except for 1 or 2, I mean, it's absurdity. It's just somebody's trying to be relevant. So going back to Candace Owens, we're kind of swerving off topic here. So ultimately, Candace Owens makes this claim about text messages, dialogue that she had. Turning Point actually, stupidly enough, comes out and confirms and says, yeah, these text messages are real. Whoever the PR manager is for Turning Point needs to be fired. That was a totally bad call. I mean, even if it was true, I wouldn't have confirmed it because it just raises a million more questions about Turning Point that I'm going to talk about anyways. And so as we're kind of going through all this, Turning Point it's very suspicious. I mean, you have all these people involved. I mean, we're going to talk about Erica Kirk and all that stuff as well. So, I mean, those were some of the major ones, right? So you have, and then after the crime had been committed and all of these people kind of took off, somebody from Turning Point actually went and collected the camera and the SD card, and they claimed that they gave the SD card to FBI. So like, yeah, we wanted to make sure it didn't get stolen. And Candace Owens actually brought that to everybody's attention and said, well, that camera was stolen. And in this camera, she claimed she had footage of it and there is no exit wound. And I wanted to just be very clear the fact that, if there is no exit wound, so what's actually going on? Is he being shot through the front? Is it a 30-06? I mean, is it possible for that to even happen if there's no exit wound? Absolutely not. So that was one of the crazy things that happened as well. The big thing that I think that we wanted to talk about was the fact that, that there was no autopsy. We want to expand on that fact that there was no autopsy. Why is there no flipping autopsy? Tell me. Explain to me why there's no autopsy. Usually when there's a murder scene, and I know during COVID, I remember when my father died, during COVID, they weren't doing autopsies on purpose because they didn't want people finding blood clots in people's blood. So they were like, oh, yeah, we're not going to do it. Specifically, if you go into the very left-leaning liberal states like Washington, Oregon, California, New York, New Jersey, you have them just flat out denying or declining to do autopsies, especially if they're of age. They're like, yeah, he lived a good life. Yeah, he's in his 60s. We don't need to do an autopsy. It's like, really? I mean, it's not required. But here's the fact. During that incident, there was already people coming out saying, no, that's fake. There was a release, and it's a public records release, just so you guys understand. There was an encounter between a few police officers as they're talking about Erica, landing somewhere, and they're talking about Dunkin' Donuts and this and that. This was when she was on her way to the hospital. So when she's on her way to the hospital, they say that the doctor has already released the death certificate, and no autopsy was requested at the request of his wife. Okay, let's be very clear here. At the request of his wife. Why did his wife not request an autopsy? That is very suspicious. Would you not want to know what had happened there? Well, even more so, what about the back of the neck, right? So if you supposedly get shot in your neck, you have an exit wound here. You know what the examiner claimed? there was an examiner, apparently. They said, and I think this was released after the fact, and they try to make it look like there was an examiner or a coroner. That being said, the examiner claimed the Charlie Kirk's neck was made of steel. And so that's why there was no exit wound. Like, okay, let that sink in for a second. Imagine the absurdity of somebody saying, okay, well, he got shot in the neck, but because his neck is so strong, with the 30-06, his neck actually stopped the blow. Like, I don't know how retarded you would have to be to believe anything like that. Like, you would have to be either the most ignorant person in the world or just really not care at all, you know, even to make that statement. Imagine being that person that makes that statement and said, oh, I have all these options. What am I going to choose? Oh, let's just say he had a strong neck. Man of Steel. Like he's Superman. That's literally what it is. And I thought, are you guys insane? So you're claiming the fact that he literally stopped the bullet with his neck? No, that doesn't sit well. I'm sorry. It doesn't sit well. And, going back to the fact that she didn't she didn't actually get an autopsy. Why didn't she get an autopsy? Like, why not get an autopsy? And somebody, I heard this absurd claim that, well, she's Catholic. So, and it goes against the Catholic faith. By the way, did you guys know Erica Kirk is Catholic? Yeah. So Charlie Kirk wasn't. So, and it's suspicious to me because why would Charlie Kirk get involved with a Catholic other than maybe for just her looks? I mean, it's kind of disappointing to me just to think about that she's a Catholic and he married a Catholic and she's, she has mass and she's doing all this stuff. And so they say, well, it's desecrating the body. So Catholics don't do that. So that's why she didn't do it. First of all, her husband just got slaughtered publicly. Basically he's a public martyr. You think God would care that you're desecrating a body to investigate who just killed your husband and left you with 2 kids? I don't think he's going to care. I don't think God's going to say, oh yeah, for this sin, you're going to hell. So the fact that they were trying to use that as kind of a scapegoat kind of is concerning to me because it's like, well, then, you could say that about anything. You can make any claims whatsoever and say, oh yeah, because of this and that. And the one thing that does disgust me, but it's also kind of telling, is the fact that they used the martyr. They used a widow. They used a widow for this incident, right? So who is the easiest person to believe, right? And so the reason why you guys should be very concerned or at least question this is because they spun this story of the widow on every single flipping channel across the entire web. Everywhere you look, Fox, OEN, you got, obviously CNN, MSNBC, every single one of these places blasted widow this, widow that. Oh, how's the widow? Where are the parents? Where are the parents? Why were the parents not at the memorial? Where are the grandparents? Where is the dad? Where's the mom? Why did they not have anything to say? Wouldn't you want to be at your son's funeral? Wouldn't you want to be at your son's memorial? Wouldn't you want to have something to say? Why would they invite all of these nationalists, Trump and all of his associates there to say everything publicly and sort of push the MAGA, era, push that forward? This turned into a nationalistic convention, if anything. It's like CPAC. Let's go in here and let's talk politics while this individual just got slaughtered in front of the entire world. Let's talk about that, okay? That's ridiculous. I think it's absurd. I think it's absolutely absurd to talk about anything other than Charlie and to, talk about his success, his legacy, his ability to be able to bring a lot of people to Christ. The fact that he was it in South Korea, prior to that. I know he's been to Thailand. He's been to all these places. And I think he mentioned, his pastor had mentioned, I think, Rob McCoy, that he was there with other people as well. And he was bringing people to Christ, right? And so that's when you had a lot of people protest after they heard about his death. They came out and they said, I am Charlie Kirk, and this and that. We are Charlie Kirk. And it was a very powerful movement kind of all over the world. And it was in Australia and it was in New England, UK specifically. And you have all these places that were supporting Charlie Kirk. And I thought it was quite phenomenal because if you look at how many people were in support of, and this was in fact a revival. I talk about all of this stuff only because I think he was betrayed. I think this was a Judas Priest kind of situation. I think this was a stab in the back, quite literally a physical stab, because I believe he was betrayed. I think he was betrayed by his own people. I think his own people basically plotted to take him out and take over his organization, because I think the company had become much bigger than Charlie Kirk. I think Turning Point had become much bigger. And I say that very facetiously because I think Charlie Kirk is Turning Point. I don't think Turning Point can be anything outside of, Turning Point can't be anything outside of Charlie Kirk. It's impossible. And anybody that's a true fan of him will believe it. But I think internally they believe they were too big for him. They believe the kind of money that was being offered to him, and in that exchange with Candace Owens, the one that she kept bringing up, she's like, oh, well, he was trying to turn away money. So basically the Mossad killed him, the Israelis, the Jewish people, Netanyahu specifically, Bibi Netanyahu is the one she's been targeting just kind of deliberately, said is the one that killed him. And so when you're looking at this entire situation, you're like, what's actually going on? There's so much going on, but was it the Jews? Was it his own people? Was it possibly his own people coordinated with the Jews? Was it Trump? Some people are claiming even Trump had something to do with it. Well, why would Trump do it? Because he has a legacy to protect. He has Barron Trump or potentially Eric or Don Jr. I mean, he has a lot of good candidates that could take his place to continue his reign. If you study the Bible, specifically Old Testament, you can see, there was a lot of, kings that always try to preserve, their crown. You had Saul. Saul, how many times did he try to kill David? How many years did he chase after David? When Samuel didn't re-anoint him, he kept asking him, I want you to re-anoint me, because he had lost his anointing. And that's what's crazy about this is people are like, well, there's no way Trump could have done this and that. Well, listen, don't be naive. If you are so obsessed with any one individual that no matter what he does, in your eyes, they will always be pure, that means you are, first of all, brainwashed. Second of all, you're in a cult. You're in a cult because anybody that can manipulate you to the point where all reason goes out the window, that is a cult. That is not a following. That is not a support system. That is quite literally a cult. And I think anybody that is that obsessed with anybody needs to question their support and question their overall view on this individual. Because I'll say it more than anybody else. During Trump's second term, I remember during 2016, all the way up until 2020, I remember we flew some flags. And we flew these flags. I flew flags 2019 pre-COVID, these 5 by 10 foot flags on the front railing of my entire house. And I had a lot of support for Trump, but my support for Trump stands with the things that I believe in, which is my own liberty, my own freedom, my own right to practice religion. I support him because he allows me to do the things that I'm allowed to do. As soon as he steps over those boundaries and he tries to strip me of my liberty, of my religious rights, of my ability to practice freedom of speech and everything else that's associated to it, then my loyalty for him goes out the window, because the only reason I support him is because of those things. So if he can't be for those things, if I can't support him because of those things, I can't be loyal to him. So that's where I draw the line, and that's where many of you guys should be drawing the line. If you see stuff that, I'm not talking about little things. There's probably some debacles about the fact that Trump recently got the COVID vaccine, shot, and some people will say, well, that's where I draw the line. Well, if he gets vaccinated, it's one thing. I'm very anti-vax, so I won't ever be supportive of anybody that is technically vaccinating people or forcing mandatory vaccinations. But I will say it's still a choice, and he allowed people to have choices, which is great. But as soon as that goes out the window, then I would never be supportive of him. If he came out and said, hey, everybody needs to do the COVID-28, right? I'm sure they're going to call it something else, but let's just say the new virus, the rat virus. It's the new rat virus. We got it from, who's he going to blame now? From Russia, or he said China. So you have all these different kind of perspectives. So That being said, I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that my support always stops with anybody that blatantly disregards people's freedoms, people's liberties, my pursuit to happiness. This is all that, Charlie Kirk supported. He supported the Constitution. He supported the Bill of Rights. I mean, we're here because we're supposed to be in a free country. This is supposed to be for freedom, not for, hey, I say something, I get banned, I get cut off, I get fired, I get this, I get censored, I get shot. Ultimately, I get shot because I don't like what you're saying. And I don't care whether we're in Biden's America or we're in Trump's America. If I go out on stage and I vocalize my opinion and I get shot, we're no longer in a freedom country. We're no longer in a country that protects freedom of speech. And there's a lot of things that should have been put in place. And I'm actually surprised that Trump didn't come out and say anybody that, does this and that, there's this different way that we're going to go about it. Or maybe finding extra security for these individuals or doing something to help liberate some of these freedom speakers, something that protects them a little bit more, something that pushes the narrative of freedom of speech. But don't be fooled, guys. Don't be fooled. This is all an illusion. There are no right and lefts. There are no Republicans or Democrats. There's evil and then there's good. And you either fall on one side or the other side. And everything in between doesn't exist. So you're either for God or you're for evil, which is Satan. And there's only two sides. You're either on you're either on the right or you're on the left. And I say that evil or good. So thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate it. And hopefully you guys can tune in for our next episodes as we kind of dissect some of these conversations further. This was episode 2, where we discussed specifically Charlie Kirk's death and how it affected some of the stuff going on the internet, some of the conspiracies and some of the opinions and the thoughts and stuff, and how everybody was behind all these thoughts. So thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned.